Welcome, everyone, to the JEM Podcast. Today, we're beginning something pretty special. We'll be leading a mini series on the law of attraction. This series will focus on how our thoughts, our beliefs, and our energy shape the experiences that we have and the direction that our lives take. I'm joined by my guest and co-creator for this series, Kate Cauley. Welcome, Kate.
Hi, Jen. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Kate is an inspirational writer. You're a teacher. You're also a coach and a lifelong student of metaphysics. And
hmm
you mentioned to me that a lot of your early experiences really opened you up to a deeper awareness of our reality. And now, because of all of that, you help many individuals learn about how they can apply the law of attraction in these practical and empowering ways in their everyday lives.
hmm
So, hello again,
Hi.
Kate. Thank you
Great
so much
intro.
for being here. We're going to start this episode with the basics. So, when people hear the law of attraction, they tend to think about, manifestation or positive thinking. But with metaphysics, it's often thought of more like this natural law of the universe, something that's tied to consciousness, energy, and this intersection with science.
hmm
What first drew you to metaphysics and then your interest with the law of attraction?
So that was a great intro and a great summary to get this started. You start talking about metaphysics and all that's involved in metaphysics and consciousness. I think for today's podcast, I think I'll make an assumption that people listening to this may not be familiar with the law of attraction. So I'll touch upon metaphysics because there obviously is a very close connection. The law of attraction is one of the laws of metaphysics. So to answer your question, my interest in metaphysics oddly got started when I was 5 years old.
Okay.
I was very, very sick. I was hospitalized and I was bedridden for months. You would
Wow.
imagine for a very active 5-year-old, being bedridden was very difficult for me. But it gave me experiences that kind of took me, out of what we consider reality. I used to have these kind of out of body experiences and just experience the world and life in a way that I don't think most people do.
hmm
And then after that, it just gave me this sense, this very clear understanding that reality is so much more than what we perceive with our five senses. And as years went on, I learned about, that there's this science called metaphysics. And it was always my intention to learn more about it. So over the years, I would read a lot of philosophy. And as you're saying, there's also a basis for the law of attraction in science, neuroscience, quantum physics. So I was doing a lot of reading on it. And at this point in my life, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about the career that I had because that's part of the law of attraction and how I applied it. But I'm starting to wind that down and really focus on what I love. And you mentioned in the introduction that I'm doing workshops and coaching and retreats and writing. Now I really have the time to dedicate to doing these things, which are my passion. And I will be getting my first degree in metaphysics in May. And
Congratulations.
thank you. And I'm from there, that's going to be a bachelor's degree. From there, I'm working on getting a master's degree in metaphysical coaching, which is really a great way, I think, that's going to help me to help others, kind of forward their use of the law of attraction and creating what they want to create in their lives.
That's fantastic. It sounds like you have a nice trajectory ahead for you.
Yeah, that's exciting. I'm really
So,
enjoying it.
so you said, and I think that's good to lay the foundation that maybe some people have never heard of the law of attraction. So, how would you explain what that is to somebody who might not really be aware of that concept?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's really the simplest way to explain the law of attraction is that like attracts like. So I think many people that have heard of the law of attraction have heard of it through books like The Secret or the Abraham Hicks series.
Mm-hmm.
But it's actually a concept that goes back thousands of years to like Aristotle and Confucius and Buddhism and Hinduism and and now there's a proliferation with books on personal development and as I mentioned before, it's supported by science. But really, the simplest way to explain it is that like attracts like. And as I think we move forward in this podcast, I'll get more into what that means and how that happens, with energy and
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, that's a very simple way to frame
very
it.
simple.
Perfect to start us off with. So you're mentioning energy and vibration. What does that mean in this context?
Yeah, so I guess I knew we were going to segue into that. So, great follow-up to that because, just say like attracts like. So it means that like energy, the type of energy that you put out is the type of energy that you attract back.
Mm-hmm.
So we actually live in I'm speaking really well, electromagnetic field. It's Friday. And we put out waves of energy that are equivalent to our emotions. So what that means, I don't know if I'm getting a little bit ahead of where I'm going. So we're this electromagnetic field, and we put out these waves of energy, and our brain actually has a type of an electromagnetic frequency detector, and it's
Mm.
located like right here in the middle of the forehead.
Okay.
And it's kind of correlates to the third eye for people who are into chakras. Um, and that's our sixth sense, and it's called ASP, which is auto sensory perception, and it gives us the ability to read energy in our environment. So that's a
Okay.
little bit of background on kind of just energy and how our bodies are sensors for energy around us. So when you start thinking about energy and that there's variations in the type of waves, the energy waves that we're putting out based on our emotions, what we would consider negative emotions like fear, anxiety, anger, worry, that emits a much lower level of vibration. But when we're putting out more what you'd call positive emotions like gratitude, love, happiness, kindness, confidence, that emits higher vibrations. So this is actually physical properties to this, and I think this is where, some people who might think, well, law of attraction is just something that's hooey and new agey, and there's really no basis to it. There is, we're
Mm.
actually talking about physical properties to the energy we put out. So if you can imagine that we're putting out, these different frequencies of
Mhm.
energy and other people are feeling it,
Right.
so that's kind of part of that foundation of like attracts like. So and you've been in a situation where um you walk into a room and you can kind of like feel the energy around you,
Absolutely.
or someone comes up to you and you could probably sense pretty quickly, whether they're putting out positive vibes or negative vibes. I
Hmm.
used to think that that was a matter of, kind of just like feeling the energy in our body, but it really does come down to this ASP, autosensory perception, which we all have. So that's going to make a big difference in the type of people that we attract to us, the type of experiences that we attract to us. So that's really what you're talking about, kind of as a basis of, vibes. That the vibes that we put out have a lot to do with what it is we're attracting back to us and creating. And that kind of goes back to that whole like attracts like.
Mm.
Um,
Okay. And so do you think there are like misconceptions around this topic? Are there, yeah, are there any things that like might be misunderstood or misconstrued?
so I guess that goes back to what I was just saying about how some people might think that it's hooey.
Yeah.
That it's just something that, some new age thinkers, made up. Um, and I think that that is really kind of misconstruing, if that's the right way to use the word, um, what the law of attraction and the putting out the energy and the vibes really is all about.
Okay. That's
I don't
totally
know if that
fair.
really answered the question.
No, it does. And I think more importantly, what people should focus on is like the energy that we are emitting, because that not only impacts us, but it affects those who are around us. And so there is an
Absolutely.
overlap between like what someone else is like sharing and providing and what we're sharing and providing. And
Absolutely.
that can absolutely affect our day to day and our even beyond the day to day, right? Like that
hmm
can stay and last with you for a while.
Yeah, and I guess so. I was kind of talking about it on this like very simple, basic level of just kind of interpersonal reaction, and relationships. You're going to want to be around people who, are putting off positive energy, and you kind of want to shy away from people who are not.
Yeah.
So that's kind of forming the foundation. And I guess later in this podcast, we'll talk a little bit about how you take that one step further in terms of, okay, so I know I'm either retracting or repelling people. What does that mean for experiences and for what I want to create in my life?
Mm. I have absolutely had that happen. And sometimes, when you're in those experiences, you're wondering, is it me? Or, you question a lot of things. And I don't want to say you in the general sense. I don't know if
hmm
everybody does, but I absolutely do. And I wonder, oh, like I was interacting with this particular person. Now I don't see them anymore. Like, is it because there's a misalignment in the energies and the frequencies amongst us?
hmm
Probably a pretty good chance that's true.
hmm
So all of this is interconnected for sure.
It is, it is. And I was just thinking as you said that, I mean, that can bring up a whole lot of other things too, in terms of what we're calling into our life when we need it and how we learn and grow from experiences that we bring into our lives. But that might be material to get into in another podcast series.
Well, I mean, what you're really talking about is what we started this off with, which is like, how does this affect and shape the way that we experience our life? And
Absolutely.
those are pretty clear examples so far, just at the very basic level.
Absolutely. Yeah, and you mentioned how we experience our lives, and it really comes back to, how we're creating our lives.
Mm, definitely. And elaborate on that a little bit, like
So our
being
lives aren't
proactive.
just what I think, I think some people think that life happens to them, and that they're not really responsible for
Mm,
what's happening in their lives, and um, so our experiences aren't just random.
yeah,
They're definitely connected to what we're creating. So that actually the name of one of the workshops that I do related to the law of attraction, create your life on purpose, because you do create what it is you say in your life. So any
yeah.
experiences that you have, you kind of can step back and take a look at, where did I play a part in this?
That can be a very humbling
hmm
experience and acknowledgement that I don't know if everybody's like prepared to have, because I think sometimes people get caught up in these feedback loops or these like cycles of behavior and then like life that could eventually, like they're not necessarily positive and you're wondering, oh, why is this happening to me? But
Yeah.
somewhere within there, it's, there's accountability that needs to be taken.
Yeah, yeah. And you're right. I mean, I think that, and that's something that in the workshops we really get into more detail about because it could be a sensitive subject. I mean, to look at things in your life that maybe aren't going well, to take responsibility for that, and try to understand why you have something to do with that is
For sure.
difficult. But I think, the first step in moving forward, if someone wants to, apply the principles of the law of attraction, is that's probably a first step. Kind of if you accept accountability for where your
Mm,
life is today, then that also empowers you with the responsibility of creating what you want tomorrow. So
mhm.
it's a good first step.
I totally agree with that. I do want to caveat by saying, like, obviously, there are circumstances that are a little bit out of our control. And so, not all of it comes down to what it is that we're emitting, but
hmm
there is this complement that is happening on an energetic level that we should be conscious of so that we could, potentially help ourselves a little bit more easily out or through that experience.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And that brings up the concept that part of what we create. I mean, like even like I talked before about, and I don't want to get like I don't want to go run too far down rabbit holes, which I have a tendency to do. I can
That's
kind of geek
fine.
out with metaphysics. But I mean, the Earth is giving off all these electromagnetic waves, and all of the things that exist on this Earth are putting out those electromagnetic
Mm,
waves. So we are just, this like, smaller than a speck of sand, interacting with all of these other things in our environment. So there are, to your point, there's so many things at play.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's a powerful thought. It really is.
it really is.
Because that even goes back to this idea of like, I think sometimes people feel a little isolated or that like we're operating in a vacuum when in reality,
Mhm.
every single thing is moving, every single thing is connected. And
Mhm.
every one of those movements and connecting points is affecting every other moving and connecting point. So
Yeah,
there's no such thing as like operating in a vacuum the way that we are established here.
absolutely.
So do you see a balance between, this like concept of visualizing or setting intentions and then like actually taking action when it comes to the law of attraction? How important do you think those visualizations are or compared to like actually taking a couple steps in this direction?
I'm sorry if I had some notes and I just like lost track of where I was going. So I should just pay attention to what you're saying and not worry about my notes.
It's okay.
So I think that you're asking about the use of visualization in applying the law of attraction. Is
Right.
that what the
Yeah.
question is? Um, so for people who have read The Secret, so when I do these workshops and I ask people if they've heard of the law of attraction, many people have, and many people have read The Secret.
Okay.
And The Secret basically is a book that says, you do a lot of visualizing and you create what you want. This idea of manifesting. You and I have had conversations before about, the manifestation could be like this instantaneous thing.
Mm,
That might be subject for another podcast because while that does happen, I think that it's important for people to really think about, kind of a role that they play in creating their lives with intention, right?
mm,
So people who are familiar with the law of attraction or have read The Secret or have, read anything else about it, a lot of it starts out with this idea of visualizing. And I'm a very big proponent of visualizing, but it's not a magic pill. It's not like you sit there, all right, I'll admit I was guilty of it. When I read I read The Secret, and I'm not, and there are other books too, so I'm not exactly sure where all these different ideas came from, but there's a lot of these ideas out there about you just keep visualizing what it is you want to create. Maybe you write it down and you wake
yeah.
up in the morning and you read like I want to make $1 million this year, and you keep chanting I want to make $1 million this year, and you picture the $1 million in whatever way you picture the $1 million. And I was doing all that for a while, um, but I wasn't really taking any action. I was doing a whole lot of visualizing. So
Mm,
visualizing is absolutely a part of applying, the energy that we have and using the law of attraction to create what we want in our lives.
yeah.
But it's not a begin all end all.
That's totally fair. And I would also like to say, like, it's not a one size fits all. I think for
Mhm.
some people, visualizing might work and help them kind of lead them in the right direction.
Absolutely,
For some other
absolutely.
people, they might say, oh, that's not for me. And let me consider this alternative avenue, which,
I guess, but I want to talk a little bit more about it later when we talk about applying it. I guess you have to start somewhere, right? So visualizing, I mean, people could think of that literally, that you're picturing, like I was talking before about, $1 million raining down on me. So you can actually picture it, or, you think about like athletes or performers or anyone else kind of picturing
mm,
something they're going to do before they do it. So I think a lot of people think of that when they think of visualizing. But visualizing is at least coming up with an idea of what you want.
for sure.
So whether that visualizing is actually having like a little video, run in your head, picturing what it is you want, or if visualizing is just kind of thinking, you know, um, I want to get a degree in metaphysics. You know what I mean? So it
Yeah.
starts with an idea. So a visualization could also just kind of be the idea or the seed, that starts what it is you want to create.
And then would the setting of the intention How did, because when you said, I want to get a degree, that's almost like, this overarching idea, but then I'm going to get my degree. That would be the setting of the intention. Is that correct?
Right.
And then,
Absolutely.
and then step one is the visualize, step two is set the intention, and then step three is actually take
Taking
the
action.
action.
Yes.
So, and you mentioned earlier how you've applied this and it's really helped you in your career. So, do you want to elaborate a little on that as well for the group?
Sure. Yeah, I think that's an important question, because you could talk the talk, right? But like actually walking the talk and having a story to tell about like, yeah, and I think that comes up in a lot of my workshops. It's like, all right, well, how has that worked for you? So taking it from the perspective of, kind of setting the intention and then taking aligned action for it. Um, I was going to get into, some people, come up with, very specific plans. I've always been kind of a seat of the pants kind of a person. When I got pregnant with my daughter, I was a bartender. There's
Okay.
a whole funny story around that I'm not going to get into right now. But I was a bartender in a nightclub. And then when I
Mhm.
had my daughter, I didn't want to go back to bartending. And there's plenty of people that do, but it
Yeah.
just wasn't where I wanted to go moving forward in my life. And I was really passionate about creating something else in my life so that I could have a flexible schedule and I could make a decent amount of money. At that point with, giving up bartending, didn't really have much money. Could
Yeah.
barely rub two nickels together and be like, my ex-husband and I would be like, let's find an ATM that gives $5 because like that's all we had, I mean, we had a house, but it was like really like scraping. But I was very passionate about wanting to have flexibility. So sometimes creating what you want, we could, as I started out with this, it could be something very specific. It could be, I want this particular kind of career, working this number of hours, making this much money. And that's a fine way to do it. And it's probably a way that would work for most people, to be
Yeah.
specific, in setting a goal. My only goal, as I mentioned, was pretty loose. I want something that's a flexible schedule so that I could spend as much time with my daughter and I could make really good money. And I started throwing clay at the wall. Ultimately, I built that into $1 million a year consulting business, specializing in technical writing, customized training, and information management for Fortune 100 companies in all different industries.
Strong, powerful woman over there.
Yeah, I mean, it was, I'm not saying it happened like that, I mean, it took some time of throwing clay at the wall, but what was really important is that I had a clear idea, even though not the specifics, but I had a clear idea of what I wanted and
Yeah.
where I wanted to get to. The other part that I think was really important, and this could be associated with achieving just about anything in your life or creating just about anything in your life, is to have a why.
Mm,
If you know why you want to
yeah.
create something, that's your driver, to keep you
100%.
going. My why was that I was passionate about having a flexible schedule and, you know, being with
Being
my
with your
baby,
daughter.
as
Hmm.
much as I could. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was
Yeah.
one way that I applied it. But yeah,
I think that's so powerful as well because if you don't really know what your why is, it can take a little bit longer, I think, too. Like you're just kind of questioning yourself, and then the universe is questioning like what it is that you
yeah,
want.
it's like a little muddy, right?
100%. And there have been many instances, I think, in my personal journey where I haven't fully, like there's a part of me consciously that was like, I want this, and then another part of me that wasn't sure. And
Exactly. That's such a great point.
that's like what I received from the universe. And I'm like, oh, what the hell is going on?
Exactly. And thank you for saying that. Because, when you think about it not working,
Yeah.
that is such a big reason. If you're ambivalent, so there is, obviously the why that keeps you on track. But if at any point you're ambivalent, how does the universe respond to that?
Oh, yeah.
How it responds to that is that it's just as kind of muddy and murky as what you're putting out there. Maybe you get a
100%.
little bit and then maybe it's taken away, or or maybe you keep on hitting some obstacles in the road. maybe that's something the universe is sending to you, right? The obstacle is maybe a way for you to say, hey,
This
do I
is it.
really want this goal? Or do I
Yeah,
need to kind of like step back, work around this obstacle, rethink it? So they kind of go hand in hand. So there's kind of that sensitivity and being in tune with, what it is you want to create, having your why, and then doing your best to stay in alignment with that. Because if you
100%.
don't, then you are, as you're saying, you're going to get very mixed results.
Yeah, I created a video that was basically explaining like the universe is completely on your side no matter what. So if you're like, oh,
Absolutely.
I believe in myself, the universe is like, well, I believe in you too. And then if you're like, well, I
Absolutely.
I hate myself, the universe is like, all right, well, then like we understand that you hate yourself. And it's like it's just all loving and all supportive. So no matter
Absolutely. And
what you
whatever it is you want.
right.
Absolutely. So yeah, there's not this, and that's why when I started out talking about good vibes and bad vibes or positive and negative, I don't know that there's like positive and negative. I mean, those are labels that we put on things. But
Yeah,
what you just said is absolutely true, that the universe is going to say, okay, this is what you want, then this is exactly what you're going to get. It doesn't, it doesn't kind of like discriminate or make judgments or, opinions or
that's
corrections,
it.
for you.
Yeah.
Um,
And
You
that's
know,
a very important message as well as like it's judgment by how like we humans are defining it in the grander scheme of all of what's happening here. There is no good or bad, like you mentioned before. So it's
hmm
just what it is as we're defining it as humans, positive or negative.
Yeah. An interesting thing about that, and this is, I think, another place where people start to wonder about whether this really works. The universe doesn't recognize the reverse of something. So if you say, I don't want
Oh yeah.
to lose my job, and you just keep the energy you're putting out is, I don't want this to happen. I don't want to lose my job, or you know, there's so many different examples of that.
Yeah.
If that's what you're putting out, you're actually kind of creating
That
the that
situation.
you're gonna, yeah, that you're gonna lose your, because you're putting out this negative energy, and
100.
this kind of negative thought about what it is you want to create. And that's not the way that you kind of, think and talk to, say, to the
Yeah.
universe.
That's
So,
like one of my favorite things is it doesn't understand no, basically in simple terms. So if you say like I don't want this, it's like you're basically saying like I want this instead
mhm,
because it does not understand the concept of no. And so
right.
exactly what you just described, you're attracting in what it is that you wish was not there for you.
Exactly. I know, and that's something that we may want to go back and revisit in another podcast, because that's such a powerful thing. I think that's one of the things that makes people like wonder whether this works or not. And that goes, and I hope you don't mind me kind of going off on this topic, but that also brings up fear, right? The fear of not getting something that you want.
Mm,
Right. So if you're more afraid of not getting something that you want,
yeah,
then you are desirous
yeah,
of that, whatever it might be, thing or person or house, or what experience,
yeah,
whatever it might be. Then what you're putting out, we talked before about mixed messages. In that case, you're putting out mixed messages, and a lot of the time fear, which is probably the strongest negative
100%.
emotion you could
Yeah.
put out there. If that fear is stronger than what it is you want to create, you're manifesting whatever is related, what you're afraid
Yeah.
of losing or not getting.
Yeah, you're absolutely like festering in that fear.
Hmm
And all of that, like I'm experiencing some of that now as well. I think it has a lot to do with control. I think sometimes we create these stories or these like illusions in our head based on what we think the universe is bringing certain people or, experiences into our lives for. And when we create those illusions, we lose sight of the reality. And then like you're holding so tightly onto what it is that you think, but that's not really the reason it was brought to you. And
hmm
so you're holding on because you want that control, but really you're not in control at all. And so by just like opening up and allowing and acknowledging, like maybe it wasn't what I initially thought or how it
hmm
seemed, it kind of sets you free a little bit. And the more you lean into that faith of everything is going to be okay, and you know, it becomes easier and lighter to like release and let go and then allow the
Mm.
flow to continue that in the direction of which you really should be going.
Yeah, I think you brought up something really interesting there too, is the speed at which something happens. So if I'm understanding what you're saying, there's maybe something that happens in your life, you're interpreting it one way, but it's really there for another reason. Maybe it's there for some kind of a lesson that you didn't know that you needed to learn. So
Absolutely.
like you're saying, sometimes you just have to have faith, that you will attract what you need and you will create what you want to create.
Yeah.
But that leads into another reason why sometimes people feel a little bit challenged about believing that the law of attraction is a real thing
Yep.
because they may want things to happen instantaneously,
100%.
right? You want something to happen, you want to, find a new guy or, get a great job or, whatever it might be, that you think that you really, really want at that point in your life. And
Yeah.
you want it to happen instantaneously. I think, from my experience and from what I've seen with other people, um, the reason you don't get things instantaneously, and that doesn't get into kind of like some manifestations that can like we could talk about some other things where you can make things happen immediately, but that's not typically the case. But think about how, like, through the course of a day, you could change your mind about some things
Mm.
several times. So if we were able to like instantly create something,
Wow.
I
Oh, I gotta
you
chill.
not only our lives, but this whole planet would be like a really big mess. So I
That
think
would be crazy.
by things not happening instantaneously, it gives you the opportunity, like we were talking before about, that like obstacles come up or,
Yeah.
it really gives you the time to really think about what is it that I want to create. And
Yeah.
sometimes what you think you want to create is not really what you want to
Yeah.
create.
Yeah.
And it could be, like we were saying, sometimes something happens where you learn a lesson and that brings you up next level and then you see things differently and then you become more clear about what it is you want to create. So it's definitely a kind of an iterative cyclical growth kind of a process.
For sure. It's absolutely a learning journey. And I think that's such an important point is wait, like when we think about this law of attraction, that's not the only law, like we started this conversation with. There are so many other laws, so many other variables. And simply
Hmm.
because we want something doesn't mean that that want is in our best interest or just almost like we need to just take a breath and acknowledge that there's so much happening behind the scenes. Uh,
Hmm.
and no matter what it might feel like, it is in the betterment of us. Like the universe is working for the betterment of us.
Absolutely.
So we touched a little bit upon this, but like, how do you think our self-worth or our self-belief actually affects what we attract?
I think it's huge, so this kind of circles back to what we were talking about earlier too, with the type of energy that you put out, so if you're putting out confidence, and courage and kind of contentment and all of these again kind of like positive feelings, those are all associated with a very positive sense of self-worth, and self-belief. So it all goes hand in hand. If you believe in yourself, and if you believe that you're worthy of creating all these wonderful things in your life, that goes hand in hand
Yeah.
with creating it.
Amen. And I do want to say, like, that's also a journey because for some people, they might be struggling with self-love or self-appreciation. And it's okay to be wherever you are on that spectrum. But the
Mhm.
more that we can lean into that love and, love ourselves, then the more that we're attracting in that love from others as
Absolutely.
well.
Absolutely.
So,
That's a really good question. It really is very important. So it's kind of foundational, right? And I guess there's different places to start, but certainly starting from a place of knowing that you deserve,
mm,
all these wonderful things to come into your life,
yeah,
is a really good place to start. In faith, you mentioned the word faith. That's probably one of the most important feelings or energies that you could put out. Because if you
Mm,
have faith in yourself, if you have faith that you can create and that the universe is abundant, that right there is just such a consistently positive vibe, that you put out that's going to attract back to you
100%.
the things that you want to create.
Yeah. Faith and gratitude, I think, like the more that
Gratitude's
you
a really
show
big one.
appreciation and blessing to what it is that's in your life, both positive and negative, because really, like we said before, there is no negative. It's just all a learning that'll help us evolve
Hmm.
to a better version of ourselves. The more that those, you know, positive to our human sense opportunities or experiences will be attracted to us. So I think,
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up because gratitude, I talked before about how fear is probably the strongest
yeah,
negative emotion or vibe that you could be putting out. Conversely, gratitude is probably the strongest positive vibrational energy that you could put out. So, if someone, and we'll probably talk about this before we wrap up this podcast, but, one of the practices that somebody can do that's not even connected with directly with, oh, I want to create this in my life, but just in terms of kind of shifting the energy in your life, if someone can just start a gratitude practice, a daily gratitude practice, whether that's when they wake up in the morning, when they go to bed at night, and I'm sure that a lot of people, anybody that would be listening to this podcast has come across ideas about gratitude journals.
yeah,
But it makes sense to do something like maybe write something down either in the morning when you wake up or, whatever time of day works for you. It could be the
yeah,
end of the day, maybe three things that you're grateful for that day because it's so profoundly powerful in
yes,
shifting, the types of energy that you're putting out, just
I
kind of
agree.
naturally and almost effortlessly, and you feel good. So then it creates this great cycle.
I think that's a really important point as well, is like it's not just about attracting different things, like that's almost a an effect of these behaviors, but it's also like grounding yourself and feeling more full and whole and loved within yourself. And
Hmm.
when I started doing those, every day I'll write things I'm grateful for. If I'm feeling, bad that day or not feeling happy, whatever, writing it down gives me at least a moment of time within that day to say like, oh wow, there's things that like I have in my life that I'm so blessed to have. And
Absolutely.
so it's
Absolutely.
really humbling and grounding and important for our personal growth.
Hmm. Absolutely.
And so, Kate, if you could, leave the viewers with one takeaway, you obviously said doing that journal would be beneficial, but is there
Hmm.
anything else that you think might be helpful as we take this journey with people?
Yeah, I was thinking about that as I was getting ready to have this podcast with you, Jen. While there's a lot of things that could be done, I think we talked before about how the law of attraction is not this magical, instantaneous thing, or visualizing by itself, like, I have $1 million, I have $1 million, I have $1 million. Isn't going to do anything,
Yeah,
if you're not taking action, right? So I do want to give a suggestion for like maybe like a 3-minute daily alignment practice that people could take. But as I just kind of like looked up to look at some notes that I have a lot of inspirational quotes like kind of stuck around my monitor and around my, I have them all over the place. And that wasn't what I was going to mention as a practice, but it is a good practice.
I love
It's
that
kind of
too.
like, being intentionally grateful for something or some things or some people, every single day, surrounding yourself with positive vibes. In terms of positive quotes and just reminding yourself constantly kind of keeps you in that place because as humans, we have this whole range of feelings that we're going to have all the time. And I wouldn't want the listeners or viewers of this podcast to walk away feeling like, oh my God, I have to like be positive all the time.
It's not
It's
reality.
not possible. It's not
Yeah.
possible. We're humans, and the human condition is that, as you mentioned a couple times, we're here to learn and to grow, and that's not always easy.
Yeah.
So what is important, because there are all these challenges in our lives all the time, is to surround yourself with as many things that keep you, in a more positive mindset. I just kind of looked up at this is just kind of random, but said if we did all the things we were capable of, we would literally astound ourselves. That was That's one of the quotes that I have. Is Thomas Edison that I have pasted onto my monitor. But so
I
I
do
kind of went
love
off
that.
track. But so as far as like a takeaway, I thought about like, so there's like this 3-minute alignment practice that you could do. So one of the, you start out like noticing, and I would suggest that the best time to do this is in the morning. And there's this one technique that I talk with participants in my like writing workshops, my law of attraction workshops about. It's called habit stacking.
Okay.
When you introduce a new habit into your life, the best way to ensure that you'll continue to do it and to make it a new habit is to stack it on top of a habit you already have.
Interesting.
Because if you just kind of like say, okay, I'm going to do this sometime today, it's not going to happen. So, probably morning is a good time, and it's only a 3-minute practice. So,
Oh, I like that.
like for the first 30 seconds, just pause and ask yourself, what am I focusing on right now? Really kind of get yourself into, seeing where you are at in the morning. And then just, maybe for another minute, stop and ask yourself, what would I really like to experience more of today? So it could be a feeling or an experience. It could be calm, creativity, connection, progress, or toward something, in particular. And then this is where the kind of the visualizing comes in. Imagine and feel, so maybe like close your eyes, and even if you don't have a meditation practice, and just kind of breathe and relax. Um, See where that feeling will exist, and then let yourself feel it, so if it's calm or peace or um, energy, whatever it might be. And then simply ask yourself, what is one small action that I could take
Mm.
today that matches that feeling? So this is a really small, very small practice, and it's, kind of like baby steps to get started. But, with all these different inspirational quotes, when you talk about, like climbing a mountain, you climb it one step at a time. So doing
Absolutely.
something like this, where you just kind of, you have a feeling, you have a thought about what it is you'd like to create, and then you come up with one aligned action to do that. So while it may not sound like a lot, if you're continually doing that, then you're, climbing that mountain, whatever that might be for you.
And honestly, to some it might actually seem like a lot, right? I think people sometimes have a hard time prioritizing or, this is a self-love practice. And I
It
think
is.
even that sometimes we have to justify doing those things for ourselves, but at the end of the day, like we matter, like our well-being and it is just so important. So I think people should be prioritizing it more and doing simple things like that can really lead you in the right direction. So thank you
Yeah.
for that
Yeah.
suggestion.
And that ties back into faith too, so like you're saying, it may not be that simple, so we're only talking about something that's a few minutes, and it's just starting out. There could be a lot of doubt about like, oh, is this hooey? Even though obviously I don't believe that it's hooey.
Yeah.
Um, but it's okay, to not believe in it, to not think that it's possible. Um, but keep trying to like fall back on faith and just giving it a shot,
Yeah.
and see where it goes. It's not gonna, happen instantaneously, but just doing that helps you to, if you, at the end of the day, if you took that one small aligned action, there's something to be grateful for. And that's bringing
Absolutely.
you, those little baby steps closer to, where it is you want to go, what you want to create in your life.
Definitely. And just to kind of end on that, it's not always going to be, rainbows and butterflies and
Mm,
fairies. And so, but I think the more that we take these simple actions, and the more we're aware of that, the more we'll start to see the actual residual effect that a law of attraction happening to us. And
Hmm.
then the easier it becomes to take those steps because
Right.
the more quickly we'll start seeing the results of it.
Right.
So thank you, Kate, so
Nice wrap
much
up.
for this.
Thank you, Jen. I'm so glad that you asked me to do this. This is great.
Well, so as we mentioned at the beginning, this is just the start of a much larger conversation we'll be stepping into around the law of attraction. And in the episodes ahead, we'll explore ideas, on why this might resonate for some people and not others, where the ideas come from, what really matters when we practice these ideas over time. And there's so many layers to unpack. We're just getting
Hmm.
started, but thank
Hmm.
you, Kate, for joining me for this
Oh, thank
series.
you, Jen. It's
I'm
been
super
great.
excited.
Can I also just mention the do people have the ability to post questions with where the podcast will be posted?
Yeah, they can post
Yeah,
questions.
so if anyone has any questions or anything that they'd like us to cover,
I
that
think that would be wonderful. And yeah, if you have specific questions for us, or you just have some concept ideas, opinions, we're always open to hearing and learning from you all as well.
absolutely. Thank
Thank
you.
you, everybody. Everyone stay blessed.
Okay.